Chapter 14 of Esthajnalcsillag, Morningstar. Morningstar heard the rumors and talk in the village of bad things happening in the bigger cities. Of course, the official newspapers wrote nothing about what was happening, just the usual censored lies. The little girl saw that a few houses were ransacked and the occupants were not to be seen on the streets anymore. But when she asked her father about this, she received no reply. The little girl was told to mind her own business and to concentrate on her job, meaning her schoolwork and the chores around the house. Morningstar overheard her mother and father whispering long into the night behind closed doors, but she could not overhear anything of what was said. School resumed after the Russian troops entered into Morningstar's village, but for some reason that, of course, Morningstar did not understand, she was escorted to school by one of the soldiers stationed in front of her family home and escorted back at the end of the school day. This, the little girl took in stride and, learning not to question anything, posed no questions about this new situation. The morning chit-chat session with the principal had stopped as suddenly as they began. As a matter of fact, Morningstar did not see the hated and feared principal for days already. Not since the outbreak of the freedom fight. The revolution was not to be referred to as a freedom fight anymore, Morningstar was instructed, but as an illegal uprising by some hoodlums against the Hungarian people. This seemed rather strange to Morningstar, since all of the people of Hungary took part in this illegal uprising against themselves. No logic was to be found in this, as in many other things that happened in Hungary in those first few cold days of November 1956. It was an unusually cold November. It had started snowing and the temperatures were below freezing. More like weather for January than November, Morningstar thought to herself. If this cold was to keep up, then Morningstar would have to begin her therapy at the healthcare center for her frozen feet and fingers. November 19th was a special day in Morningstar's life. This day was her name day. Name days in Hungary, even to this day, are almost, if not more important than birthdays. Morningstar was looking forward to a nice cake, maybe a few little presents to celebrate this occasion. On the morning of her name day, Morningstar went off to school as usual. She was scared because she could not find the notebook that her French teacher asked the pupils to bring. And that meant that she would get a bad grade for coming to class unprepared. Morningstar did mention the notebook to her parents, but her father told the little girl not to worry about it. She would not need the notebook. All day long in school, Morningstar was thinking about the nice evening that was awaiting her, and she saw the cake being prepared already in the morning when she left. Morningstar returned home from school that day, a little tired. She had a boil on her backside that made it very painful to sit in class. Some of her teachers did manage to bring a pillow for her to sit on, and sometimes she was given permission to remain standing. By the afternoon, Morningstar was also running a slight temperature and was rather achy all over. When Morningstar walked into her home, all she wanted was just to soak in a hot bath and to lay down before supper, and before all the friends of the family came over to celebrate the name day. As Morningstar walked into the house, her father told the little girl to change her clothes and put on the clothes laid out for her on the bed. And there were at least 4 suits of clothing there. Morningstar asked her mother why she needed to put on so many clothes when she was hot already from the fever. The mother told Morningstar that they would be leaving shortly to visit Morningstar's paternal grandmother, and it is very cold in the car. There was no heat in the car. Morningstar was less than overjoyed at this news, and she was sure her grandmother would not be jumping for joy at seeing her either. Morningstar saw a suitcase on her parents' bed, and she asked how long are they going to stay at grandmother's house. What about her homework and her schoolwork? Who will give an excuse for not being in school? Morningstar's father came into the bedroom and ordered the little girl to remain silent, and no more questions are allowed to be asked. Morningstar's father told her that from this moment on, Morningstar was to do as she was told, do it quickly and without any hesitation or question. Morningstar was not to talk to anyone and not to tell anyone that the family is going for a visit to grandmother's house. Morningstar was given an aspirin to lower her fever and to ease her pain, and she was told to dress silently. As Morningstar was dressing, she saw her father packing blankets and food into the car. The drive to her grandmother's house usually took about 3 hours, and it was getting almost dark outside as it was. Morningstar thought to herself that this visit could have been postponed until the morning to drive safely when it was light outside. And anyway, that way she could still have her name day party. Morningstar became aware of the strangest thing. Her father was gathering all of their papers, such as birth certificates and all other important papers, all the jewelry and all the money that was in the house, and put them in his briefcase. Morningstar's father also packed his minister's robes and the Bibles and hymnal books. All of these goings on Morningstar observed in silence. Even the little girl's older brother, now a young lad at the age of 12, was silent. This was not only unusual, but even scary to Morningstar. For her brother not to be making trouble or fighting or hitting Morningstar was beyond the little girl's understanding. Nobody seemed to be happy about this outing to Morningstar's grandmother. Morningstar's little sister, who was 2 years old at this time, was also bundled up in as much clothes as could be put on the baby and then wrapped in blankets. A doctor friend of Morningstar's father came over and gave some medicine to Morningstar's little sister. Our little girl was told it was to help the baby from becoming car sick. This doctor also gave a shot of penicillin to Morningstar to help with the healing of her boil, and instructed the parents not to squeeze or any way touch the boil, as this might cause blood poisoning. Morningstar was beginning to feel sleepy from the aspirin and the shot the doctor gave her, and she saw that her baby sister was asleep already in her mother's arms. Morningstar's father helped her into the car and set her down on the back seat together with her mother and the sleeping baby. And then he covered them with blankets. Morningstar's brother sat on the front seat next to his father, and he was still quiet. Morningstar's father locked the house, making sure all the lights were off and the heat in the wood-burning stove is out. Then he also sat in the car and then told everyone to follow him in a prayer, because it was almost dark and the roads were slippery, was the reason given for the special prayers. As they were praying, Morningstar saw tears roll down the face of her father. The little girl had never seen her father cry before. After the prayer was finished, Morningstar told the family to look back on their house one last time. And then the father said that he has placed his fate and that of his little family in God's hands. To be in God's care, Morningstar thought, was a good place to be. And the last thing she saw before sleep finally took over on her was the car pulling out of the dirt driveway. The soldiers waved to them as they were pulling out, and Morningstar's father told them that they were off to visit grandmother as a name day present for Morningstar, and that the family would be back the next night if anyone was wondering where they are. Morningstar fell into a restless slumber. Every time a passing car's light shined into the car, she tried to wake up, but could not open her eyes completely. Morningstar did, however, notice that as time went by, they were not headed in the direction of her grandmother's house, but in the direction of Budapest. Of course, she did not say anything because she was told to remain silent no matter what happened. Our little girl was nodding off and on, but slowly she began to come completely awake. A bit groggy yet, but Morningstar felt better and was not feeling any pain anymore. All of the clothes and the blankets kept her warm. She was, however, disappointed that her cake was not packed to bring on this trip and that it was supper time and no food was in sight. Morningstar also had need of a bathroom. She told her father this, and he said to try and wait until they were out of danger. Actually, Morningstar's father wanted to make sure that he was not being followed by the soldiers or anyone else for that matter. Finally, he did pull over to the side of the road, and all did what nature commanded them to do. The baby's diapers were changed, although she was still fast asleep. It was only then that Morningstar realized, as she was looking around, that they were close to Győr and about halfway to Budapest. When the family of Morningstar reached Győr, it was very pitch dark and extremely cold. The snow was falling in beautiful white drops, and the light of the big city made the snowflakes sparkle. Morningstar had no feeling of danger, or for that matter, nothing seemed unusual to her except for the fact that instead of being at her paternal grandmother's house, they were now all the way in the other direction, halfway to Budapest. The little girl, being groggy and sleepy, concluded that maybe her father took a wrong turn somewhere along the way in the dark, and that is the reason for them being here now. When they reached Győr, the car was stopped by Russian soldiers. Again, Morningstar's father reminded the whole family to remain silent, no matter what was about to happen. Morningstar's father stated that their silence could mean the difference between life and death. Morningstar, by this time, was wide awake and alert. Her little sister was still asleep in their mother's arms, but was beginning to move around, and it seemed she would soon wake, and then the baby would cry. The parents of Morningstar seemed to be concerned about the baby waking up also. Morningstar's older brother was silent, but some sort of feeling showed on his face, which was highly unusual for the boy to show any kind of feelings, except for rage and hatred. Morningstar actually saw that her older brother was afraid also. As the family was sitting in the car, the Russian soldier motioned for Morningstar's father to follow him with the car. The father did as he was instructed, especially since the soldiers did have big guns with many bullets in them. Morningstar thought to herself that she would not argue with that either. The next thing that Morningstar was aware was that they were in a parking lot in front of a big building. Morningstar must have dozed off again for a little while, or else she would have recognized that it was the central police station in whose parking lot they were. The whole car was surrounded by Russian soldiers, about 6 of them and an officer. Morningstar was still not afraid, but of course she had no idea what was really going on. Little girl was used to seeing these soldiers around since they were in her country ever since the girl could remember. The officer went to the driver's side of the car and opened it, and I took Morningstar's father by the arm, and with 2 other soldiers took the man inside the building. Now Morningstar began to understand that silence was in order, and why. Either someone followed them after leaving home, or else the soldiers in Siófok went into the house and saw that the family had gathered their most important papers, which meant that the family was planning to escape from Hungary. For anyone trying to escape from Hungary after the quelling of the freedom fight meant death for sure. The Russian soldiers that were standing around the car were looking into the car through the windows. This made Morningstar's mother very frightened. She was still a very beautiful young woman, and stories of what these Russian soldiers would do with her if they got her out of the car were plenty and horrid. One of the soldiers was showing a chocolate bar and was making signs that it is for the children to eat. And then another soldier came to the car and smiled at the sleeping baby and offered another chocolate bar. These chocolate bars came from the Red Cross shipments that the soldiers regularly stole. Morningstar knew that to refuse such a generous offer from the soldiers would entice them to anger. But her mother said that the chocolate is probably poisoned, and that they are not allowed to accept the offer of the soldiers. Well, the soldiers did get angry for sure. One of them was saying that he had a baby just the age of Morningstar's little sister. The soldiers knew why the mother did not permit the children to accept the chocolates, and they were hurt to think that they would poison a child, and especially a little baby. They started banging on the car windows even harder and were ordering Morningstar's mother to roll the windows down. One of the soldiers came out from the building, bringing with him a big thermos of hot tea. Seeing the hesitation of Morningstar's mother, the Russian soldier drank out of the tea first to prove that it is not poisoned. Then he slipped the big thermal jug of tea into the car window for Morningstar's mother to give the children some hot tea before they freeze to death. Now there was no choice anymore. The offer of help had to be accepted, or the soldiers would tear the doors down of the car. So Morningstar's mother thanked the soldier and said that if it is poison, at least they will all die together. Morningstar was not aware how much time her father spent inside the big building. But it did seem forever until she finally saw her father emerging from the front door of the big building. The father was walking a bit shakily, and he looked rather pale, but otherwise he seemed to be intact. Morningstar's father got into the car, and just as he was about to turn the start on, a Russian officer shouted after him to remember what was said to him and to follow the instructions or else. Now this Morningstar, of course, could not understand, but the rule of silence was still in effect, so she did not ask. Morningstar's father turned the car around at this time as they started to get on the main road. Morningstar noticed that they were going towards Siófok, her hometown. Morningstar was relieved that she was spared a visit with her paternal grandmother and that at home her cake was still waiting for her. Morningstar fell into a slight slumber, and her baby sister was sleeping also in Morningstar's lap. Everyone seemed to be calm and quiet as the car was turned around and heading back home. End of chapter 14.